What's going on YouTube? It's Teej back again with another video. At long last, the face cam is back. I have my new laptop ready to pump out videos back in my regular frequency to this channel. Thank you everybody for bearing with all my, less than up to my par content leading up to the NFL draft. Unfortunately, when my laptop decided to die, but we work with what we work with. We play with the cards you're dealt. So, nonetheless, I am back, and we're going to have a little bit of fun here in this first video since my return, going back to my way too early 2022 NFL mock draft. I'm excited to talk about this. Now, obviously, a lot has changed since this time period, so there are some swings and misses, and there are some decent call-outs on my end, if I must say so myself. So, excited to bring this your way, and hopefully you will enjoy today's video. If you do, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, want to see more football content, more sports content in general, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. And, of course, join for a conversation down below in the comment section. What are some takes in here that made you laugh? What are some of the takes that you think didn't age well, in your opinion? But also, my next video is going to be a 2023 way too early mock draft. So give me some of your favorite prospects for the 2023 NFL draft. I skipped it ahead so you don't have to listen to my intro or anything, but let's waste no more time and jump right into it.
Regardless,
also, so you know, AirPods are just so I can hear better.
Simulator, the Lions hold the number 1 pick. And if that's the case, I think you got to go Spencer Rattler. You can get rid of Jared Goff after next season for just $10 million.
Yeah, so, Rattler, obviously, that doesn't obviously play out. He's back at school, and I hope South Carolina and, Baby Beamer and company can resurrect some of his draft stock because, got the arm, can make off-body, off-kilter throws, move the pocket, extend plays. He's got the wow plays under his belt. He just needs to be more comfortable playing within the offense. So, it's kind of a long road ahead for Spencer Rattler, and maybe he won't get back to, first-round contention. He almost certainly probably won't be a top 5 pick. Like here, I thought he was going to be a presumed number 1 pick. But definitely a fall from grace for Rattler, but I hope that he can bounce back and improve that stock.
So $10 million in dead money, but that compared to what, $35-40 million on his salary, you take that. And this team put together a really nice foundation around him. They got Penei Sewell. They drafted a couple of interior guys like Aleem McNeil and Levi Onwuzurike. They get a corner and Ifeatu Melifonwu. Like a lot of what this team did.
I think they added to that this draft.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, talked about him a lot in my draft tier ranking video. If you missed that, definitely encourage you to go check it out.
That's a win, calling out Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Has this Mahomes-like ability about him where he just makes throws where you're like, how can the human body do that? So that wow factor easily solidifies him as like a top half of the first round type of guy. Sometimes he does a little too much and he can make some mistakes, especially early on last year at Oklahoma. Like I remember he was getting off to a really slow start. Some of it was, turnovers from Spencer Rattler, kind of just making silly mistakes. But, if this is the case and the Lions hold the number 1 pick, Spencer Rattler makes a ton of sense. You already started to build that foundation around him, give him a more favorable spot to have some success. Not necessarily immediately, but early on. And speaking of that foundation, I think this is a big reason why I would see in this world Kayvon Thibodeaux being the pick for the Houston Texans. One, they took Davis Mills in the 3rd round, which if Davis Mills is what we think he might be, a big project, I wouldn't let him prevent you from taking Sam Howell or any other QBs that you might like here at 2.
But they like Mills, so you know what? And also back to the Lions, they built a foundation. They are putting their potential future rookie quarterback, potential future franchise quarterback in a nice spot with nice pieces around him. So I don't knock what the Texans did with Derek Stingley being the pick at 3, and here in this situation it's Thibodeaux at 2. But I think if you look at those 2 players, they might have the most upside of anybody in this draft class. Obviously that's up for debate, but in my opinion, those 2 guys might have the highest ceiling of anybody in the 2022 NFL draft class. So interesting that similar, same but different.
I've been thinking about it though is ideally Mills isn't going to play until the end of this upcoming season, a la Drew Lock in his rookie year with Denver.
Not quite, but
and then you'll use the 2022-2023 NFL season, which sounds weird to say, as his full year to evaluate him.
And that it will be.
You could even say Jalen Hurts last year, very similar to what I'm describing. Also, if you take quarterback here, like this roster is still in disarray. They drafted 4 or 5 guys this past draft. And it's just a bunch of one-year contracts. You're hoping to get some compensatory picks, have them weigh into that equation so you can get some extra 3rds and 4ths and mid-round value. If you take a quarterback here, they're walking into probably the still worst roster in in the NFL. So
and they made some progress, but to be fair, Nick Caserio was basically treading water until he could move on from Deshaun Watson. Now he's got those 3 ones from Cleveland in return, and now we'll get to see what this team builds itself to look like.
I would rather go Kayvon Thibodeau. I don't know what the 2023 quarterback class looks like, and it is a risk waiting off to another year. But by the time the 2022 draft is around, you have an idea of a couple of names, right? Kind of like this year, we're talking about Spencer Rattler, we're talking about Sam Howell, we're talking about Malik Willis, Desmond Ridder, yada yada yada. So I think you go get a once-in-a-generation type of dude. Like, this guy is just a freak, super athletic, has good size, and he has good strength to go with it. I mean, this is a complete pass rusher. And it'd be interesting enough, if this happens, it'd be 3 years in a row, right? Oregon has a player go in the top 7. Justin Herbert a couple of years ago, Penei Sewell this past draft, and now Kayvon Thibodeau at 3 very different positions. 3 of the most important positions in football, but 3 very different positions. Oregon is not one of these programs that produces X position, man. It's just... they do it all randomly. Those have studs at different spots. Regardless, let me get off that soapbox and move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And this was one of the tougher ones to pick because at number 3, they could go Derek Stingley, who's probably the best player available, and Pro Football Network would agree. But man, it's already a crowded wide receiver room. So instead, I'm going to go offensive line. I know they took Walker Little. They're thinking the future Cam Robinson replacement, but Jawan Taylor allowed the most sacks of anybody last year. They're also looking to get rid of Andrew Norwell, so Evan Neal makes some sense. He could be a right tackle replacement. He could play guard. Maybe you're moving Walker Little to right tackle. Neal has plenty of experience playing at left. And this is just the next power offensive lineman to come out of Alabama. So
not quite a power offensive lineman, but a good blend between being a good sound pass protector and having some upside as a run blocker as well, freak athlete to go with it. This is interesting because there were definitely times where it felt like Evan Neal was going to be the number 1 overall pick. So interesting here that, I was a little early to it. I'm obviously not saying I'm a guru or an insider or anything like that, but kind of interesting how this almost played out just with Jacksonville at number 1.
These were just more so names to keep your eyes on throughout the year, but I feel like Neal could help boost up that offensive line because there's not a whole lot of other holes left on that roster. Really,
other than head coach, as we learned.
On the Philadelphia Eagles, if this happens, this is perfect. Derek Stingley Jr. gives you that number 1 corner this team desperately needs. This is, reminiscent of Patrick Peterson coming out of LSU. This guy is just a stud.
That's some high praise, but he ends up going to pick higher. But also, there were plenty of mocks where, Stingley's kind of the low point, the valley of his draft stock. People have him going, 15 to the Eagles, 18 to the Eagles. If this were to be the case, which is also interesting because obviously Philadelphia doesn't end up picking 4, Cincinnati doesn't end up picking 5. But in this situation, you wouldn't have scoffed at this then. I don't think you would have scoffed at it if it did end up happening with the Eagles somehow having the number 4 pick and then landing Derek Stingley.
But he does it all. If he can stay healthy, play a full college football season, you're going to see it. This guy's unbelievable. And then we get to the Cincinnati Bengals, and another tough one to judge because I think they need to go edge, but they could certainly go offensive line, still working at that position. Ultimately,
I definitely was not high on Trey Henderson at this point. Like, he had that career year in New Orleans. I did think it was going to be followed up in Cincinnati, but he ended up doing it, so he proved me wrong.
What I think I'm going to decide to do is a potential Riley Reef replacement, or
did I go Charles Cross?
Tackle that kicks Jonah Williams in a guard where I think he would be better. I think he would be a fine tackle. I think he could be a better guard. I'll go Charles Cross, and also these.
I've always liked Charles Cross. I know the Mike Leach, air raid offense can scare people off, but I think he's got some good run blocking under his belt too. I mean, he goes out and he gets dudes, but not an all-world athlete. But he was my OT1 here. He's the second OT off the board and becomes a top 10 pick. So kind of cool that that came to fruition. Obviously, the Bengals ended up kind of curing their offensive line worries in free agency, but had that not happened, Charles Cross would have been one of the best cases scenarios for the Bengals had they not signed a Lyle Collins or someone like that.
These rankings are not going to be the end-all be-all. This, for example, if you want to go see a 2022 early mock draft, Todd McShay did one.
Skip past the side.
And I'm trying to think of the
actually. Who did I?
Clemson. He had at the end of the first round. They had it at Xavier Thomas, 302nd.
Yeah, that didn't end up happening.
As good. We'll see throughout the upcoming year how he's compared to a guy like Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater. On to the Jets. The one position they didn't really address and they still need to get better at is edge. I'm going to go Zach Harrison. It's just, Ohio State. They produce these edge guys, high level. He's got good size.
Well, they did need edge, and they do address that by trading back to the first round and getting Jermaine Johnson, a guy they really like. So, Clearly, they saw it as a need as well, and Zach Harrison didn't end up being the guy, but position, right mind of thinking.
I think the production's going to be there. It's going to be a good team, so that plays into it. And this in corner, which, spoiler, we're going to get to that with the Jets.
Okay.
Two spots that I think they didn't get better. Instead, it was a very offensive-heavy draft. The top half of 2021's draft, rightfully so, giving weapons and protection to Zach Wilson. Now they're a couple of defensive upgrades away from being serious playoff contenders. Then we get to the Giants.
It's interesting. You look at the draft order here. Giants ended up picking 5 and 7 in real life. Here, predictive draft through Vegas odds, 7 and 10. The Falcons do end up getting the 8th pick. The Broncos did end up with the 9th pick. They just traded to Seattle. Washington did get pick number 11. And Minnesota not far off at 14. They ended up having the 12th pick. So, interesting. Even the Chargers down there at 18. They ended up having 17. So, kind of wild. Shout out to Vegas for being really darn good at their job.
And don't know which one's which one's the Giants pick versus which one's the one from the Bears and part of the Justin Fields trade. Regardless, it's a top 10 pick. And in this spot, that clearly means Daniel Jones didn't work out, so you're drafting his replacement.
Sure.
And I would love Sam Howell. They would need to get a new offensive coordinator, I think, in my opinion. Jason Garrett probably isn't the guy that Sam Howell best matches
Whole new
with.
staff.
This guy wants to stretch the field, has a huge arm. I'm not entirely sure I saw that from Garrett as a play caller last year. I'm also interested to see how he uses Kadarius Toney, not typically position or wide receiver type.
If he's on the roster next year.
Anyways, Howell, man, if they got a new OC and brought him in, big plays are waiting to happen with the likes of Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney, who I just mentioned, Kenny Golladay, who's a downfield monster, wins those 50.
I've always liked Golladay.
I would love this. This is an opportunity where this team, especially here and with another top 10 pick, they're a QB away.
And I will say, Sam Howell should not have fallen in the 5th round. He should have been taken somewhere on day 2, late, maybe even if it's the 3rd round, late day 2. But wow, obviously this didn't end up happening. Not a top 7 pick, but he was my QB too. I like him, and you can look at that Giants team, and outside of interior offensive line, now they cut James Bradbury as well. So now there's a hole at cornerback. We all kind of assumed he was eventually on his way out, but not a whole lot of holes. That's poorly worded, but not too many holes to fill for the Giants. Still kind of worried about that, center left guard spot, depending on where they want to play Feliciano. And obviously corner now a big need after moving on from Bradbury. But, Daniel Jones is going to be the talking point around the Giants. So, if Howell was the guy they liked and ended up grabbing him at any point in the draft, that would have been an interesting battle. And, obviously Jason Garrett's no longer there. Brian Dable's the guy heading up the offense. And Sam Howell, I think, would have been a really interesting guy to helm that type of a system and see how reminiscent and how close he can get to a Josh Allen fit for that offense.
So definitely keep your eyes on the Giants going QB next year, especially if the Daniel Jones experiment does not work out.
You could argue it has.
To the Atlanta Falcons. I really like Kyle Hamilton here. They took Richie Grant, and I think at that point, maybe there's some other positions that you didn't prioritize this year that are more valuable, right? Like edge has a bigger impact on the game. Also, they're just more expensive players. So I'm going to go Drake Jackson. Again, I haven't really totally scouted, especially edge is a tough one I really want to watch a lot of tape on, but Drake Jackson's
just because you can win in so many different ways, and I want to see your full arsenal of how you win with your hands, you win with power. I just want to see all of it. So it does take a while for me to watch all those guys, and it's also hard to sometimes get film on smaller school guys and whatnot and try to work around all that. But Drake Jackson ends up going to the late 2nd round, but especially at this point a year ago, he's at a Power 5 school with a lot of tradition. The talent's definitely there. You love the speed and bend that he plays with. That's what you love to see. Those are the highlights that stand out for an edge rusher in a lot of ways. That or a good bull rush. So obviously he ends up falling a little lower than 8. But if Atlanta's especially this time thinking they still have Calvin Ridley as a future wide receiver 1. Edge would have been a really intriguing route they could have gone there at 8, but obviously to Ridley, they need to fill that void. Drake London, they're going to play bully ball with him, Tate, and Pitts.
Somebody who's getting a lot of buzz, and they didn't draft an edge player until the 5th round this year, which feels like
they draft 2
problem. And
before then this year.
This guy wants to blitz a lot, so having edge rushers who can win would certainly help in that defensive philosophy. So,
and I'll also add Arnold Bacchetti, fantastic value at the top of the 2nd round. So they did address this position at a premium pick.
Edge here, Drake Jackson, I think makes some sense. Could definitely be safety. And then we get to the Denver Broncos, and I'm basing this draft off the idea that Aaron Rodgers is not under center. Because if Aaron Rodgers is under center, they're picking 29th.
Well, it's not Aaron Rodgers under center.
They're not picking 9th. So because Aaron Rodgers is not currently on the roster, let's go out there and give him Keaton Slovis.
Keaton Slovis is at Pittsburgh now, so he didn't declare either. So him and Rattler kind of in that similar boat. Hopefully they can repair their draft stocks. Slovis will need to have a Kenny Pickett type of season to get anywhere near the first round. But yeah, and honestly, if Denver still had this pick, didn't get a Russell Wilson, I don't know if they still go quarterback, because I think no matter what, they were trying to get a veteran. Now, maybe there's arguments, but now given what we know about this 2022 draft class and how they were perceived by NFL teams, feels like they would have prioritized, getting a Matt Ryan once he's available, maybe even settling for a Carson Wentz or even a Jimmy Garoppolo. So I feel like a veteran was probably the route all along for Denver, given what we know now about how the NFL looked at this past year's draft class, the quarterback position. But if they held on to the pick, it definitely wasn't going to be Keaton Slovis, but, Malik Willis or even Kenny Pickett would have been interesting.
I have a hard time trusting these USC quarterbacks, right? Because they always fit the build. They look like what you want in an NFL QB.
Spoken like a true Notre Dame fan.
Been the best one. At least he has the most highlight flashy plays. Maybe you could say Mark Sanchez over the last decade or so. From past Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer put together a pretty decent career, but even that wasn't as great as we kind of had thought about if you were alive and a big college football NFL fan at the time. But Slovis has those tools.
So nasty.
And it'll come down to this college football season. If
he
doesn't play well, and if USC
underperforms
again, I could see him falling all the way to round 3. Really could. But if this team plays well, he could ride the top 10 range. And if you're Denver, you have Teddy Bridgewater, Teddy Two Gloves making $3 million. You're not really worried about that. And again, if you're picking top 9 again, it means Drew Lock or Teddy B wasn't good enough. So go out there and find a potential replacement. Again, basing this off of them not having Aaron Rodgers. Then we get to the next pick for the Giants. And I'm going to go interior offensive lineman. Kenyon Green is a dominant run blocker, and I really do like him for the Giants. It's all
right above Ikem Ekwonu. Obviously, he climbed up some boards, but Kenyon Green goes 15 to Houston. A lot of people are like, it's a bit early. In my eyes, based off my board, I would agree with that. But like I said earlier, I'm concerned about that interior offensive line still for the Giants. I think they're about one starter away from really piecing it together. And in this situation, you're filling up that left guard spot. You got your quarterback, and you're starting to put things together for the Giants. Obviously, it ends up being Neal and Thibodeau, who two of the best picks in the first round in my eyes. So fun to look back at this screen. It definitely fell down the board a little bit, and it's hilarious to see Ikem Ekwonu there at 36 when people had him as high as number 1 on their boards.
Also, Soldiers coming back. You already have Andrew Thomas. Matt Pert looks to be a pretty good player. I think long term, especially next year, you can cut Solder, and the penalty is smaller than his base salary, so you can save some money. Pert's your long-term right tackle, and then you have Andrew Thomas at left. They're still trying to iron out the interior, so I think Green goes a long way trying to improve that unit. And here we go. This is the pick I was.
Sorry again about the music too.
Malik Willis. For those who don't know, I live in Virginia, so Liberty, a school I'm familiar with. Actually used to be in the conference of my alma mater, along with the Big South. So I know what Liberty is, and also.
And Willis ends up falling a lot further than this, but had Washington not gotten a quarterback in the form of Carson Wentz, this is an interesting spot. It's also interesting because Washington again ended up getting the number 11 pick, and I saw a lot of reports, a lot of friends who were Washington sports fans sending me stuff saying, the Commanders really like Chris Olave. That's their guy. That's the receiver they want. They ended up trading back from 11 to 16 with the Saints. The Saints grab Olave, then 11. And maybe that's what channels the reach in most people's eyes with Jahan Dotson going 16. So that's kind of an interesting storyline as well.
In and around the area, I am surrounded by Washington football team fans. This feels like such a fun storyline that could potentially happen. And Ron Rivera has said he wants to build this team and have a complete roster before he goes out there and gets his quarterback. Dude, Malik Willis has the athletic capabilities, different type of runner than I think Cam Newton was, but has that athletic mold that we obviously know and we can connect to Ron Rivera. But this guy can make some throws. Go watch his tape. If you haven't heard of Liberty, go out there and watch a little bit of what you can from Malik Willis, and then keep your eye out on this college football.
Highlights are crazy.
This is also going to be a good test, because if Willis doesn't look good this upcoming year, the narrative is going to be you couldn't handle the pressure, big spotlight, could have been a first-round pick, couldn't handle it, therefore he falls. And then he becomes like next year's Kellen Mond or something like that, a younger Kellen Mond. Though Mond is pretty young. Regardless,
I'd take Willis over Mond.
Willis has some top 10 potential. I could definitely see a world where, kind of like how we didn't expect Zach Wilson to leapfrog Justin Fields, maybe he leapfrogs Rattler or Sam Howell. Don't know if he gets to be number 1 in the class, but in some people's board,
nobody in this year's quarterback class was leapfrogging nothing.
Has just those traits you can't teach. Again, he plays at a small conference and in a smaller school, so it'll be interesting to see how NFL teams grade him and evaluate him. But him with Washington, they're QB away, and man, that would be a really fun fit. Then we get to the Raiders. Really thought about QB here, and there was one QB I didn't get to put in this when I was mocking up. Tyler Show. He was a backup for Justin Herbert at Oregon, and he's kind of a name that you may not seen a whole lot of these early.
I'm skipping past this. This was a waste of time. That didn't end up happening.
People saying he still could, but regardless, I could see him sneaking in the first round. On from Derek Carr, try to restart the roster.
I know people saying they should.
Rookie contract, excuse me. They like to spend money in weird areas,
but
this almost certainly feels like
pretty good get for the first round.
A spot where
and they extended Carr
is committed to Carr. And I really wanted to go with a reach here, but I think Justin Ross is a wide receiver they just don't have. They moved on from Tyrell Williams, so now they're kind of lacking that big body wide receiver. And Justin Ross, 6'4", easily could be wide receiver 1 next year. Again, corners and wide receivers, and then also edge.
Yeah, he wasn't. Justin Ross goes undrafted, and I also mentioned Tyrell Williams in this sentence. Wow, that's a tough sentence to hear. But yeah, Ross, medical concerns, obviously a big part of why he fell, but also that Clemson offense was just not as good as I was anticipating. I was really thinking DJ Uiagalelei, Heisman candidate. That offense is, just more of the same, and Justin Ross puts up gaudy numbers. He's this, big body, downfield, go get the football type of guy. He doesn't move all that well. Both, vertically he's not all that fast, but also he's not an elite route runner or super agile. But as a guy you can work with, you can't teach size, you can't teach physicality, you can't teach his ability to go high point the football. So definitely didn't end up happening. And you know what? Raiders do end up getting a big body number 1 wide receiver in the form of Devontae Adams with their first round pick. So it worked out one way or another.
Said earlier, those are guys I have to watch tape. I love watching wide receivers and corners. Those are my favorite positions to evaluate and watch tape on. But man, Justin Ross just has that highlight ability and that big play of nature about him.
And Ross's freshman year was electric. I don't care what anybody says.
If they have Ross, they can use him as an X. I think they need to use Henry Ruggs and his speed as a field stretcher, which will open up things in the intermediate areas of the field, 10 to 19. I would love to see him end up in Las Vegas, which is where the draft is actually being held in 2022, which will be a lot of fun. And then I think best player available here. I don't know if Kyle Hamilton stays on the board till 13, at least as of right now. Like if the draft were today,
he does.
I doubt it. But the knock on this is he is a box around the line of scrimmage safety. They already have that in Jeremy Chin. I'm a Notre Dame fan. I see Kyle Hamilton as someone who can do it all. So that's why I don't think he's on the board at 13. He's not a safety that does one thing really well and is okay at others. He's great at everything.
If let's say the world plays out where Carolina moves back from 6 to 13, whatever reason why, and took Kyle Hamilton, paired him up with Jeremy Chin, I'd be intrigued to see what that looks like. But given this team's need for a left tackle and a quarterback, that probably was not going to ever be in the cards.
So I think Hamilton as a deep safety, you can use him around the line of scrimmage. Maybe you just convert Jeremy Chin to straight up linebacker. I don't know. But Hamilton's too good a value here to pass up. Then we get to the Minnesota Vikings. And I know they had a couple of edge rushers they took on days 2 and 3. Especially Janarius Robinson, I'm intrigued by, a really long guy. But outside of Danielle Hunter, this team has drafted so many mid-round edge guys that haven't panned out. And given where this roster is, there's not a whole lot of holes. They really did a great job addressing the offensive line. I think eventually this team has to understand if you're going to get elite top-end edge rush help, it's in the first round. And in this case, George Karlaftis, I think is how you say his name. Not 100% sure on that. Edge rush.
It's Karlaftis. And you know what? Especially after moving back to 32, if he was there 2 picks later, given Zadarius Smith's injury history, Danielle Hunter's had a hard time staying healthy, I wouldn't have hated that as a, off the rip DPR, but then when injuries come to arise, as a guy who can step in and fill in there, obviously go a different route. Karlaftis not even there at 32, and they move back from 12 to get number 32 with that trade with the Lions, but I really wouldn't have hated this. So not a terrible pick here. And, corner obviously could have been in play too had they stayed that high. Ends up being a safety at 32 instead.
Out of Purdue, I think would be a fantastic fit opposite of Danielle Hunter, or maybe even a Danielle Hunter replacement, and this team could take the Colts route and double up on edge. But I'm hoping, given how good this roster is, they're going to put together that edge needs to be first-round priority. They could certainly also go corner, though I think Jeff Gladney going to take that second-year leap this upcoming season.
Yikes, he's not even on the roster anymore, obviously reasons why. He's in Arizona.
I also think that. Cameron Dantzler's already a fantastic player. They bring back Mackenzie Alexander. You have
He's good. He's not fantastic. That's a bit of a hyperbole.
They're looking for a nickel guy, but I think edge is the priority here. Moving on to the Arizona Cardinals. Didn't get a corner this year. Here we go.
Oh, I tried to do this in so many mocks. I love this fit. If they're looking for a man press corner, I would just love to see Kaiir Elam. One, I just think he would look fly as all get out in that jersey, but that's beside the point. But that type of corner is what they're missing right now, and this is a team that needs to get better in the secondary by itself outside of Budda Baker. And Byron Murphy's great in the slot, but would have loved to see this fit, but that does not come to fruition.
The drafts are already starting. This and then one more. Once we get to the Cleveland Browns, I'm just going to stick with it. Eventually, they're going to draft one of these guys. Kaiir Elam has everything you want in a corner.
Big Kaiir Elam guy from the jump.
A school that really has done a good job becoming a corner powerhouse. So, feels like it makes a ton of sense, but because it makes some sense, I don't know if Arizona.
That is basically me just absolutely lighting up Steve Keim, who is just a GM who thinks differently than I do. And, he's a GM and I'm just a guy. So, who's to say I'm the right one here? But that's just absolutely hilarious.
Does it also big year for Cliff Kingsbury. I'm thinking about making a video about my top 5 coaches, maybe top 10 coaches.
I did do that. Check it out.
And then maybe another accompanying video.
Check out that, and then I also did coaching candidates, which a few of those potential candidates ended up getting jobs.
Offensive and defensive coordinators who are well positioned for head coaching jobs. Let me know in the comments if you'd be interested.
Let me know if you want me to do it again. I'll do it.
Coordinators making that head coaching job leap, or head coaches who we could definitely see get fired during or after this upcoming year. Then we get to my team, the Pittsburgh Steelers. You knew I was doing it. Before
which quarterback did I go with?
You knew I was
Ritter.
going quarterback.
Okay.
In my opinion, best one available.
He was my quarterback 3, and I definitely thought he was in the cards at 20. Granted, I was thinking that going into the draft where Pickett might be the pick at 6 and Willis might go 9, and Pittsburgh, didn't want to move up, and then they're just kind of picking the best of what's left. Obviously, they get their choice of whatever quarterback. They go Pickett at 20, but it's kind of interesting that, Steelers fans have been saying this for a while, but they need to get that Big Ben heir apparent, and, especially now with him retired, you need to address that now. You kind of wait a little bit, but Ritter would have been an interesting fit. Obviously, he goes to the 3rd round, but our perception of this quarterback class was entirely different a year ago.
And Ritter, really good athlete. Sometimes feels like he is too quick to use his legs, which I think that's just more of a mental thing. Also, Cincinnati not known for being a powerhouse school.
But I will say, back to the quarterbacks, outside of Spencer Rattler, who obviously didn't declare, and Keaton Slovis, who did not declare, the 3 quarterbacks that were in this that I put in the 1st round on top of those 2 who didn't declare, obviously this is there. Howell, Willis, and Ritter. Now, obviously, I went Willis, Howell, Ritter in my quarterback rankings, but had them all in here in the top half of the 1st round.
With offensive linemen, protecting him at a high level. But I'm intrigued by what Ritter could become. And he's going to be a guy who's probably playing in a Senior Bowl next year. So he has his senior year at Cincy and then also the Senior Bowl as a couple of opportunities to really shine. And here in the top 16, I think he could certainly solidify his position in the top 10.
Can't say I was wrong on a lot of that.
One. New England Patriots are next. I think Chris Olave makes some sense. They can move on from
Pour one out for Pats fans. I know a lot of New England fans were hoping this would happen. Obviously, he goes 11 to New Orleans, but man, that would have been fun to watch. It would have helped out Mac Jones a ton.
Kendrick Bourne for a pretty minimal expense. I think they would actually save him some money, not much, but Chris Olave is the polished route runner, and then you have Nelson Aguilar as the field stretcher. You still have the 2 tight ends, obviously, and you want to run the football. And it's a really good fit. And assuming it's Mac Jones, this would be a really fun guy to help make the game easier for Mac Jones, get open at a high rate. Next up, the Chargers. Another tough one to pin down. I thought about Christian Harris here. They could definitely get better at linebacker. But I decided to go edge. Aiden Hutchinson. Nick Shea had him in his top 10.
Yeah. I bet he did. So he ends up going number 2. So not really an option here for the Chargers. But they did make a trade for Khalil Mack. So clearly, obviously, LA saw this as a position where they need to get better and partner somebody up opposite of Joey Bosa. So obviously, don't hate that whatsoever. And if he fell to them at 18, they would have been sprinting the car. There was no way in any sort of round that was going to happen. But, man, that's kind of wild.
Again, I have to wait and see. But Hutchinson coming from a Power 5 school, and from what I saw while I was watching Kwity Paye, I like what I saw just generally watching as a football fan. Michigan's done a good job producing these edge guys. And I think he fits in that 3-4, and I think he could be the guy opposite of Uchenna Nwosu. I know they took Chris Rumpf the second.
Let me clarify that. I was thinking that in this 3-4 transition, when Brandon Staley was hired, Joey Bosa would be a 3-4 and that's initially what I heard a lot of. He ends up becoming, outside linebacker, primary edge rusher on the other side, opposite of Uchenna Nwosu. So in this realm, it really would have been Bosa and Hutchinson.
You're banking on him gaining weight, getting stronger. Here you could just take Hutchinson and have an answer at that position potentially. So, especially with them taking Asante Samuel Jr., kind of took corner off the board for me. So I think Hutchinson makes a ton of sense. On to America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. I'm going to go to the offensive side. I know they have a lot of playmakers. Last year, the contract for Michael Gallup, and maybe instead of trying to replace his
don't do it, TJ. Don't do it.
They go out there and get a tight end. Jalen
Weidemeyer didn't have a great season. The athletic measurables weren't there. He's not a first-round pick. So this was as big a miss as I have.
Weidemeyer, right now looks like.
But that said, they did have the franchise tag Dalton Schultz, keep him around, so makes some sense. But yeah, nah.
The number one tight end in this class. Things can change. We thought it was gonna be Pat Freiermuth in the 2021 class, and then Kyle Pitts told him to hold his beer. Put on the season that he did. Weidemeyer, right now, first round type of tight end. Maybe there's another guy who emerged into that class. And again, maybe you replace Michael Gallup production with, instead of a wide receiver who you can replace later on in the draft class. It's going to be another good wide receiver class. Maybe not as good as the last 2 years, but still good. I think you can find value later on. And then you throw Weidemeyer into the mix and get a pass catching option at the tight end spot that you just don't really have right now. Back to the Philadelphia Eagles. So earlier, reminder, we went corner with Derek Stingley Jr. And I'm not done going secondary. They have Anthony Harris this year, but Bubba Bolden Jr. Especially.
Obviously, they didn't go with Bolden here in this spot for Miami, but safety still is a need. I'm kind of interested to see what they end up doing. They did bring back Anthony Harris in a one-year deal. He wasn't all that great last year, but safety is kind of one of those needs. But they play a lot of soft zone, so maybe they're saying you don't need anybody who's a world beater at that position. We can go cheap. That's where we can kind of cheat the salary cap, steal from Paul, pay Peter, go cheap at safety, pay elsewhere.
As around the line of scrimmage, safety forced 4 forced fumbles last year at Miami. Good young player, really like what he could be, and this team desperately needs safety. So you get Stingley, you get Bolden. They drafted a couple of interior guys. Edge could certainly be in play here. Could also be looking for another wide receiver, but I think you look at this wide receiver.
Yeah, they were.
I think there's going to be, especially
considering A.J. Brown.
This is assuming their pick here at 4. They're going to be picking the top of round 2, which, that seems to be a sweet spot to get good value for wide receivers, not taking them too early. And there's going to be a couple of these guys who I don't have going in the first round. So I think that makes sense for Philadelphia. On to the Tennessee Titans. The fall stops for Christian Harris. You have Jaylen Brown just on the one-year deal. You have Rashad Evans, but the fact they brought Brown back kind of signals to me Evans isn't ready. Maybe he takes that leap this upcoming year.
Well, they're just kind of different style linebackers, so I was kind of off there. But yeah, Harris doesn't go until the third round to Houston. So I was kind of intrigued by him potentially fitting into this defense and seeing what Mike Vrabel could coach him up to be. A little small, but great athlete, some good pass rushing chops too. So not a first round guy, but would have been an interesting fit for that defense.
Also, the concern might be, so another Alabama linebacker because Evans didn't work out. Harris, I think, is a little different, and I think there's not a whole lot of needs really left on that defense. But Harris, at least as of right now, feels like a top 10 guy in a lot of people's eyes. But obviously, that could change. On to the Indianapolis Colts. They have played this game of chicken, ignored the offensive line, and maybe just because they're so good from left guard to right tackle, they have like plus to elite level players at those spots. Maybe they're just going to roll out with Sam Tevi and be like, yeah, whatever. He's not.
No, obviously they end up bringing in Eric Fisher. Left tackle right now is an issue. And Zion Nelson didn't declare, but you're starting to see him populate way too early 2023 draft classes or draft videos and drafts in general. But this is a guy converted tight end to tackle. Thank Bernard Ryman in that respect, and he's gotten better year over year. So obviously with Tyler Van Dyke being the quarterback that could potentially play himself in the top 10 after a hot finish to last year, there'll be a lot of eyes on Miami. So this could be a guy who pays dividends because of that, and maybe he gets himself in the top 10 as well.
Not good, but everyone else is fantastic, and maybe they'll have the running back help out and the pass blocking setup, use tight ends. They have a ton of them. Maybe they'll chip. I don't know. Maybe they're hitting up Russell Okung right now. I don't have an answer for you. But assuming Sam Tevi plays like Sam Tevi has played over the last 4 years, I think they're going to
Now, and obviously, speaking of Bernard Ryman, that's who the Colts draft in the 3rd round. So they do have a potential guy who could start there at left tackle day one. Obviously, injury concerns will cloud that a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if they do end up bringing in a veteran. But they did end up getting Ryman, so it's kind of funny. I didn't even think about it. But I'm talking about Nelson, Ryman, these tight ends to tackles. Mocked one here to the Colts. They ended up taking a different one, but all the way late in the 3rd round. So really good value there for Indy.
Cool. So Zion Nelson, a guy who could easily go top 10. Really strong dude. Really good pass blocker. I think he fits well there at left tackle. Back to the Jets. So again, reminder, said Zach Harrison felt like edge and corner positions they didn't address in this past draft. Well, we're going to take care of that. Took Zach Harrison. Now they're going to go get it. Josh Jobe out of Alabama. I think we're...
No, they didn't go Sauce. Sauce and Booth. I kind of was thinking I might have gone there, but yeah, Jobe, not a first-round guy. But they do end up going corner and edge in the 1st round, and obviously by trading back up and to get Jermaine Johnson 1st round, they also add a wide receiver with their true other 1st-round pick at 10. So positions were right. Players, I couldn't have been any further off really with Zach Harrison and Josh Jobe.
Was he like 60 something over here? That's way too low. This guy's a 1st-round type of corner, waiting to be taken. So the Jets get their 2 biggest needs, get a couple of good defensive upgrades, and then now we can start seriously considering them a year after this draft, if it played out like this, as playoff contenders. Next to the New Orleans Saints. I'm not entirely sure Jameis Winston works out, and I'm just going to say it doesn't. And I'm also going to say they're probably not picking 24th if Jameis doesn't work out. If he doesn't...
If you're new to the channel, I was so convinced the Saints were going to be bad. And, if Jameis Winston was healthy throughout the rest of last year, we're going to find out this year. If he can stay healthy with them adding, Chris Olave at 11 and drafting a replacement for Teron Armstead, we're going to get a true look. And plus, obviously signing, Jarvis Landry, Tyrann Mathieu, loading up a lot of veterans on that roster. We're going to find out what Jameis is all about and how good this team can be. But, yeah, I was really fading New Orleans at this point, thinking they would not pick at 24. And obviously, they didn't end up picking there, but that was also due to a QB injury.
Play well. They have a good roster, I suppose. So they're probably around this Pittsburgh to New England Chargers area, give or take. So I guess 24 is not too far off, but that feels like on the lower end. Matt Corral from Ole Miss, man. He had a lot of weapons.
Corral. Obviously doesn't go in the 1st round, but I did have some mocks with him going to New Orleans in round 2. At this time of this recording, him and Sean Payton would have been a really interesting pairing. Now, when I was doing my mocks leading up to the draft, it would be him and Pete Carmichael, but still same offense, same philosophies. That would have been an interesting pairing, but instead he's going to Carolina, who apparently had him as QB1
this past year, especially like Elijah Moore, and he has that Lane Kiffin beneficiary. Kiffin's an offensive juggernaut, knows how to create big plays.
Obviously, also worked against him as
inflates offensive numbers. And Corral could have those numbers boost him into the 1st round conversation. Again, thought about show here we talked about earlier on in the video. But Corral, I think, especially if we can not only see the stats, but big throws. If this team can knock off, say, a top 10 team, they're playing in the SEC, they're going to have some chances. If we can win a few big games and really stand out in those games, give something that scouts and analysts and all of us in the media can hold on to and say, yep, that guy has potential. He has shown flashes, 1st round. I think Sean Payton might take the chance on him at 24. So earlier I said, corner for the Cardinals. I mocked it so many times in 2021 mocks. And for me, it was Christian Barmore, IDL for the Browns. And I'm going to stick to it. DeMarvin Leal, right now, the best interior pass rusher.
Leal. I just apparently couldn't say names right at the time, but he ended up going to Pittsburgh in round 3. One of these guys who, especially at this time of the process, likely a top 10 pick in a lot of people's eyes. So I have going a little bit later. He falls a lot for, I think, 76 where Pittsburgh took him, so some 50-plus odd picks later. But, the Browns do add a defensive tackle, Perrion Winfrey, but he's more of a pass rusher, single gap shooter. Really could use a nose, true run stopping defensive tackle there in the middle. They didn't end up getting that. Maybe the board just didn't shake out right for him, but interesting that I do go DT here.
This class, just an absolute monster. Obviously, they've moved on from Sheldon Richardson.
Potential to be a monster.
Later,
I'll stand by that.
They can get his replacement. And again, Leal next to Myles Garrett. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. And then they obviously still could use edge because Jadeveon Clowney's on a 1-year contract, as is Takk McKinley. So maybe some of these guys, Brenton Cox could be a good fit, among others, including the Clemson Xavier Thomas, who I showed earlier. So it could definitely be edge, but I really want this team to get an interior pass rusher, I guess. On to the Miami Dolphins. Here at 26, I feel like it's an okay spot to take running back. Also, this is such a complete roster. Isaiah Spiller, 5.5 yards per carry at A&M last year. Dude's a stud.
All this age bad. Spiller is a 4th round pick, minimal athletic ability, but he is super young. He's like going to be 20 by the time he suits up for game 1 as his rookie. So, if I'm an NFL team, I'd want to see that guy at 20, see what he can become in my setting as opposed to going back to college or, obviously with someone else. So, interesting gamble there for the Chargers, and plus it's a 4th round pick, so it's not all that big of a risk. The Dolphins don't have a complete roster. Now, I did like their defense a ton, and the offensive line wasn't quite clear that it was going to be as bad as it ended up being. So, just to validate where I was at, this absolutely should have been my offensive line. Knowing what we know now, obviously I'm way off here. Running back in the first round was not the route for this team.
Really like that pick there for Miami. Helps try to complete that offense.
Even if they draft an offensive tackle,
Ravens.
I'll take Tyreek Hill.
They just signed Alejandro Villanueva, but that feels like a band-aid. It's a 2-year contract actually, but I think they might be able to get out of it after 1 year. Also, not a whole lot of needs left. Linebacking core looks solid. Took a couple of edge players this past draft. Took a couple of wide receivers. Rashad Walker might be your best bet. They also took Ben Cleveland as a guard. Maybe they're looking center here.
Yeah, and Walker ends up falling to the 7th round of the Packers, which I think was too low for him to go, but he obviously was not a first-round pick. But I'm interested to see what the Packers can do. They like these athletes at the offensive line position. They have a great track record of being able to develop them. So one of the best places Walker could have gone.
I could see that. But I just like Walker as a potential Villanueva long-term replacement. Maybe not even immediately. Maybe Villanueva's still the right tackle, and then Walker steps in after that. Another pick for the Detroit Lions. And here, I'm going to give him a wide receiver. A lot of people were knocking them, waiting to take wide receiver.
One.
And then they got a really good one in Amon-Ra St. Brown. Let's go John Mitchie III, the next Alabama wide receiver.
So I gave him an Alabama wide receiver. I wasn't too far, and even you look at the wide receivers there. No sign of James Williams. He was off of just about everybody's radar because he transferred from Ohio State. He was bogged down on the depth chart there. He breaks out in a big way, and my wide receiver one heading into the draft or in that top tier. I don't know how I really would have ranked between him, London, and Garrett Wilson, but in that top 3. Mechie obviously goes in the 2nd round to Houston, so not quite here as high as 28, but would have been an interesting fit, and I did give him an Alabama wide receiver, but I think that, I don't know if I had any more wide receivers, but still available here. Wilson, Burks, Drake London, George Pickens, a 2nd round pick. Yikes.
A step up. Even when Waddle got hurt, Mitchie III had some good production. You throw him on the outside. You have Amon-Ra St. Brown, who has inside-out versatility. You're starting to build that wide receiver room really well around your now quarterback, number 1 pick, Spencer Rattler. A few more picks to go. Green Bay Packers, again tough because, did they trade Aaron Rodgers? Did Jordan Love play okay? Because if he didn't, they're probably not picking 29. This is, you could, if Love doesn't play well, you could switch them in Denver with the snap of a finger, though. Especially if they make that trade and get Patrick Surtain. I'm a big Jordan Love fan. Not to the extent I liked Aaron Rodgers, but still think that team can be good.
I've changed my 2 in there.
20s-ish. But maybe quarterback, this is show. Maybe, I don't know about 7 QBs in the 1st round, though. I'm going to give him a linebacker. Feels like a spot they could continue to improve, especially just off-ball, stand-up linebackers, less of the pass rushers, more of those interior guys. Ventrell Miller has the making and the off-ball zone coverage skills that I think could make him a 1st-round pick.
Wow. Yeah, he wasn't. They do end up going off-ball linebacker, though. That's kind of interesting that I saw that as a need. Now, granted, they did end up changing up their defense with Joe Barry playing a lot of dime and really only had Devondre Campbell out there. Now, was it out of necessity? Who knows? But now it's going to be Campbell and Quay Walker, so they did go off-ball linebacker, but definitely not Ventrell Miller.
On to the Bills, and I have actually a theory. I was thinking about this while I was in the gym.
What did I say?
The Jags take ETN at 25. And, Urban Meyer says we're going to use him in a lot of different ways. Kind of like how he uses those gadgety wide receivers and running back roles. Instead, he's going to use a running back and gadgety wide receiver-ish spots. Maybe they felt the need to take him at 25 as opposed to 33 because we heard, the Bills front office was interested in taking a running back. especially a guy they didn't have in the room, the big play guy like Travis Etienne. So maybe that caused the Jags to pull the trigger at 25 instead.
They ended up going running back. It's in the second round, but there were a couple first-round mocks that had Breece Hall going to the Bills. There were some rumblings, and I had some second-round mocks, or mocks including the second round that had Hall falling that far and going to him. So interesting. There's been a lot of misses, but that's kind of an interesting pairing to see how that kind of stayed true and stayed hot as a rumor throughout the process.
But here, let's give the Bills a running back, Breece Hall. It depends. I like Singletary and I like Zach Moss, especially as a duo. I think they complement each other well. I think there is success to be had. But this is the year to find out, right? They have a good offensive line. Like, those two need to put together some good production. And if they don't, running back in the first round with that good of a roster.
And I'm normally somebody, really, if you have a ton of holes, especially, that's where it's like, if you're going to take a running back, outside the top 50 makes a lot of sense because realistically, if you're picking 38 like Atlanta, you have bigger holes to fill. So the exception being, if you're a team late in the first round and you're looking for that last asset. Bills would have been the one team this year I'm like, I don't love it because they could use a number 2 corner. They end up getting one. But had they stayed pat and gone Breece Hall, it wouldn't have been my favorite pick, but I wouldn't have hated it. I wouldn't have been cursing them for that type of move because it's just kind of completing and getting that final piece. But CB2 was a bigger need in my eyes.
Makes total sense for the Bills. 2 more picks. Ryan Jensen's a impending free agent, and as I was trying to find picks here for Tampa, could be wide receiver, but they got Jalen Darden at a really good spot last year. I think he could be a fine Chris Godwin, Scotty Miller, Tyler Johnson replacement to any one of those 3. I think they keep Godwin around long term, so I think an opportunity to save money and get cheaper somewhere. Why not do it at a position that isn't highly valued?
That's a really interesting pick there with Linderbaum, because if they did get Jensen back, maybe they would have been aggressive and moved up for him. Obviously, he falls to 25, so not really out of the realm of possibilities. They had the 27th pick, but there were also mocks with them getting Zion Johnson and Kenya Green, so IOL certainly in play for Tampa, even from the beginning of the process.
People's eyes. So just use a first-round pick for a nearly complete roster and Tyler Linderbaum and just replace Ryan Jensen as opposed to paying him $8, $10, $12 million. You just saw Frank Ragnow making, 13 and a half. Whew. Do you want to pay Jensen that much money when you have, a lot of cap restraints and restrictions everywhere else? Probably not. So Linderbaum, I think, makes some sense. And the final pick, the Kansas City Chiefs. I'll give them Garrett Wilson.
Wow.
I am a little bit worried about Wilson. I feel like he is super reliant on Chris Olave being the number 1 and him being the focus.
Yeah, Wilson ended up proving to be the number 1. And wow, if Garrett Wilson somehow fell into the lap of the Chiefs, maybe it would really be Kansas City moving up, especially after this is the world where Tyreek Hill has been traded to Miami. That would have been a really spicy fit. And there were plenty of people saying that they should go up and get a James Williams or a Drake London or a Garrett Wilson. So really interesting fit there. But this was a really fun exercise going back and looking at my way too early 2022 mock draft. Tell me what you thought. What were some of the stupid things I said that made you laugh? What were some of the cool things that you're like, hey, that was interesting how that stayed true throughout the process that you saw, liked, and give me some prospect for the 2023 early mock draft that I'll be doing my next video on. Hopefully you all enjoyed. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. If you're new around here, be sure to hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Till next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.